the guy knows how to get people moving, and he knows how to teach people how to sell insurance, and he knows how to teach people how to teach people, which is where you make a bunch of money. When you can teach other folks how to teach other folks, you can build a massive organization, and Zach's one of the best. So take a few seconds right now, text everybody you know, if they're in the business, and even if they're thinking about getting into business, have them hop on this call, because it's going to be stupid information that they don't want to miss.
I agree. Frank, when I came back, I remember being at that conference in 2020, and I was standing next to Zach, and he came up, introduced me to him. And I remember then his team was doing like $500,000 a month. And then it was shortly after that, man, it was just exploding. And the people that were on his team, and then they were then recruiting others. I mean, his entire group just took off like a wildfire. It was absolutely amazing to watch. And, someone that I respect immensely in the business. So I'm excited to be able to sit back and listen on whatever he has to train. And I'm sure we all have a lot to learn. So Zach, you there, bud?
I'm here, man. Thank you for the kind intro. And I appreciate, as always, having the opportunity to give back. And I've learned a lot from both of you guys and a lot of people on your team. So I just appreciate the opportunity, man.
Thank you, Zach. It's all you, man. Whatever you want to train on. I mean, we're willing to listen to anything you got to say. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I think, and you mentioned, kind of that growth period. I'd like to start there, that, because I think a lot of people, and you guys can all ask John Wetmore this too, but during that time, that kind of 150,000 to, $500,000 mark, like that time in the business, I think everyone thinks like it's supposed to be fun and it sounds kind of fun, but it really sucks. Like, so if you're there right now and it sucks, it kind of supposed to, right? Because you have a lot of money coming in, you have people coming in, you have people quitting, you're writing business, and you have a lot of stuff going on. And that's kind of the startup phase, right? And I remember a lot of times when I was in that phase of the business, like calling or texting John Wetmore and going, hey, like at some point this is going to get better, right? Like at some point this is going to be pretty cool. I just needed that validation. And I was like, he was like, yeah. But what he did, which was really helpful for me, was he started going through and based on, based on where I was at. So say I was at like a 130 and, we're doing a couple $100,000 a month. And he started going like, okay, like do the math now. If when you add 5% on, 250, and then you add another 5%, you're doing $300,000 a month, and you add another 5% and you're at a 140. And so I started like seeing and projecting forward what the income would look like based on just getting to those next numbers, right? So I think if you're there right now and you're like, okay, I'm doing this volume at this comp, and you can project forward and see how much money you can add to your revenue, to your bottom line by getting a couple raises and adding some volume, you start doing, okay, take your personal production out, start doing the math on, to get to a 145, you're at $750,000 a month and your average spread is 10%. Like you start doing some math on that, and that gives you something to project forward to and to, understand what it will look like. And it makes the current sacrifices worth it, right? So I remember looking at that and going, okay, like this phase right now is okay. Like I'm bringing some money in, I'm still selling, I'm putting a lot of money back out to build my business. And, I may be cash flowing like 6 figures a month, but I'm not, I'm not netting that amount of money, which is okay, right? And I had to realize, okay, I'm gonna have to really practice delayed gratification and understand that, I can either make a lot of money now and never really grow, or I can keep putting money back in with the understanding that at some point I'll be able to cut expenses and then drive my net up, right? So the first thing I wanted to say was like, if anyone's in that sort of area, that, between you're reading the sales managers, like that part of the business is not the most fun part, but once you get past that, there's not a lot of people that make it past that. And I think it's because they quit right during the hard part. Like you're already in the hard part, just buckle down and make it through that part. And then the other side actually is worth it. And it is a lot of fun and the cash flow is there and you really enjoy it. So I've reflected back with a lot of our guys, and I've talked to a few people recently who are through that part, making it through that part. And some of the things that people have done to make it through that, I think there's a couple of things people do to sprint through that part of the business as opposed to, walk through it or stop in it and then go backwards, right? Because the worst thing you can do if something sucks, like you're already at the bad part, keep going, you get out of it. If you stop in the bad part, it's like stopping in the middle of the desert, right? Like if you stop in the middle of the desert, you're going to die of financial debt. That's the desert part of this business. So the first thing was always understand, and you have to be very organized and diligent with your day and understand which activities you're doing throughout the day are income producing activities, right? Because as you're building your business and as you maybe have a staff person, and you start to bring on a few agents, you could work 24 hours a day in this business and get nothing done and produce no revenue if you wanted to. There's a lot of things you can waste time on that are not super important at the time that generate no revenue for your business, right? So what are the things that generate the most revenue? It's first and foremost, you gotta lead from the front and produce. So for me, when I was in the field or selling virtually now, either way, I was like, I'm going to make sure that I do my sales first, and it keeps the cash flow on, but B, you're a goldfish in a tank when you're leading a team, right? And so if you're leading by the right example, and like you mentioned, Frank, Hall of Fame producers, we had 29 last year, which is a really strong number, I thought. And we're hoping to double it again this year. And everyone always asks, well, how do you do that? And the short answer is, do double that yourself, and then people will follow, right? And I think a lot of people go like, okay, like what can I say to my agents that will help them go be a Hall of Fame agent? Or what can I say to my team to get the average per agent up? Like there's nothing you can say to them that will really do that. Like you have to go out there and prove the concept and not be, sitting, in your ivory tower talking down to your team, but going like, hey, we're doing this together. Like Mike read that he was, one of the top 10 or 15 agents for the week. Like that's very, very important. And I'm sure the people that work directly with Mike don't go like, oh, wow, he's telling us to do all these things. Like, what a dick. They're like, no, Mike's telling us to do these things and he's out there proving it day in and day out. So I'm going to do it with him, right? Like if you guys are on Mike's team and you feel that way, give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat, because I am sure you feel that way, that he's out there leading from the front with you. And I'm sure everyone also has experienced the people, and hopefully I may offend someone, Mike, but I don't really care if I do, actually. I was going to say I care. I don't. Like, I'm sure people have also dealt with the managers who sit there and do nothing, right? And who you feel like just get an override and they need your override to survive. And I never wanted my team to feel that way. I wanted to be like, I'm in the trenches with you. We're doing this together. And I would never ask you to do anything that I won't do. And that prevents a lot of resentment from you getting an override from someone if you never ask your team to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself, right? So I think it's really important in that stage. And everyone's like, I want to get out of the field. I think that getting out of the field eventually is a great goal. You should build a profitable business and get out of the field. But I think the trick with doing that is don't get out of the field until, like, whenever your team thinks you should be out of the field, I think you keep going for a little bit longer. And then they're like, okay, he really doesn't have to be out there with me, out in the field with us anymore. He's just doing it to help us out. And then you get out later on. But I think people get out of the field too early, as opposed to, to wait a little bit longer than you have to. Wait till you're doing, a couple $1 million a month, then get out of the field, because your team won't resent you, right? So I think the first thing is, if you want to help establish really good producers, go produce yourself, do what you would ask them to do. And Mike, the way that we built a lot of our culture was, we were all like me, Easton, Jake, Wiley, a lot of the guys now that have built big businesses within our group, we were all doing it together. And we always took the approach of, if people don't fit our mold, which is just hungry people that want to win, that aren't going to complain, and that want to be coachable, right? But if people don't fit the mold of people that we want to work with, we weren't going to beg people to work with us, right? And as you start to build a business, and as you start to get into that, that growth phase where you're going to VP, then you're doing 250, 300, 400, 500, apps a month as a team, your time becomes very valuable, right? Because you still got to sell, you still got to be training agents, you still have to be doing recruiting, which we'll touch on in a minute. So what you have to do is you have to be picky with the people that you recruit, right? And you have to ask yourself, because everyone, and a lot of people in this call have recruited, I assume. And I'm sure everyone has had a gut feeling about someone they brought on. They're like, that person's never going to do anything, and they don't. And then you have a gut feeling about someone you do bring on, and you're like, that guy's probably going to be good. Like, trust your gut with people, and don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole. Don't try to bring on people that you're forcing to do things. And, so be selective with who you recruit, because if you're an agent on this call, you probably sell a lot of insurance, or you have a manager that sells a lot of insurance. So your time is very valuable, right? So if, like, I always looked at it this way, Mike, I was like, my best year, I sold 800 apps in the field. Okay. So I was like, I believe that I provide a decent amount of value in this business, that I can teach someone how to do the same thing. And my time is valuable. So if I'm looking at, someone I want to bring on and mentor in this business, do I want someone that's going to do everything I ask them to do, or do I want someone that I'm going to have to drag with me? And I started looking at it like, okay, if I'm going to have to spend, Mike, how long would you think it takes to train the average agent? Like, if you're training someone who's a 30 app a month type agent, what hours would you put on that?
It's probably 3 months. I don't know how many hours though, but I'm sure.
Probably 3 months, probably maybe 100 hours you'll spend with them to get them to like where they're on their own and don't have to call you anymore.
I would
So
agree.
let's just say, like, for easy math, if you're in the field, you make $1,000 an hour, or you're selling, you make $1,000 an hour, right? And you're going to spend 100 hours trying to train someone. If you try to spend that time with the wrong person that's not willing to reciprocate time with you, that's $100,000 mistake. It can be, right? If you overstay your welcome with that. So what I always like to do is pay really good attention and bring on good people, ask them challenging questions during interviews. And I'd rather have 10 agents all selling 30 apps a month than have 30 agents all selling 10 apps a month. Because the 10 agents selling 30 apps a month, those people are making good money. They're writing good business. They're not going to quit because they're doing well for themselves. And you're helping them provide, a lot of value in their life, so they're going to be loyal to you in return, right? If you have a bunch of agents, maybe 10 a month is a little low. Maybe say you have 5 agents or 60 agents selling 5 a month, right? Like, a lot of those people are going to turn over and quit. So for me, I was like, I'd rather just not work with those people. I'd rather work with people that want to take this very seriously and be able to allocate my time in the right direction, right? So very intentional with your time selling, very intentional with your time building, and then going through this building process. I'm sorry for all the women on here. I don't have a lot of good non-sports analogies. If you don't like sports, I'm sorry, or guys who don't like sports, whatever. I didn't mean to be sexist, but anyway, I'm gonna get canceled on your call, Mike. But no, but I always look at it like it's a big tryout the entire time, right? And I'm working with new agents, I'm working with direct agents to me, and I look at it, it's like a massive tryout. And I'm like, okay, like, can this person, be on the JV team, right? Like, write 5 apps a month? Can they be on the varsity team in high school? Maybe write 10, 15 apps a month. Can they play in college? Can they do 20, 30 apps a month? Can they be a pro in this business and write 20, 30, 40, 50 apps a month and build a team? And I'm looking for the people who rise to the top on their own, right? Because leadership is taken, not taken, not given. So I'm looking for the people that rise to the top. I'm looking for the people that stand out from everyone else, like the Eastons of the world and the Jakes of the world and the people that have made my life incredibly easy. They identify themselves, and then I'm like, I'm gonna spend a lot of time with this person, trying to replicate myself in them as many times as possible, right? And literally looking at it like, how many different franchises can I set up that are exactly like what I do, if that's what they want to do, right? How do I help them set up exactly what I do as many times as I possibly can? And my goal, Mike, is I try to find someone who I'm like, okay, this person wants to build a big business. They're selling, they know what they're doing. They have a big heart for people. They like people, they care about people, and they're willing to spend the time, effort, energy, and money to build a business. And then I dump a ton of my time into that individual for as long as it takes to get them to a couple hundred apps a month. And then I let them go, right? Like, not let them fail, but I'm like, all right, Mike, you know what you're doing, man. You're a stud business person. We don't need to talk every single day. What I need you to do is the same thing I did with you, is find a couple people to help, basically set up another franchise of you and them. But I'll be here for helping you whenever you need. You're doing a couple hundred apps a month. We don't need to talk every single day, multiple times a day. Like, you're a very intelligent, smart businessman. Do your thing, bro. If you need anything, I'm here, right? And my goal is just to replicate myself as many times as possible and then get out of the way. Because what I did, Mike, in the beginning, which is time consuming and doesn't allow people to grow, was I would stay on top people forever. And I'd call Easton and people every single day and like, hey, what are you doing? What about this agent? What about that agent? And number one thing we've learned from Sean that I think is one of the best lessons that he teaches is familiarity breeds contempt, which it does, right? And if you stay talking to the same people every single day, 2 things are going to happen. Eventually, they're not going to like you. You'll get too friendly with them, and they'll stop listening to the actual important things you say in business, right? So for me, I'd rather, spend a lot of time and help them get up and rolling and then move on to the next person, and do that as many times as I possibly can. And then let them know, like, I'm here to help you, but you're running your own thing. You don't need me every single second of the day. If you're running something you don't know what to do, or you need help with a carrier, or you need help with, a system or a process or whatever, great, call me. If you need me to talk to one of your guys, great, call me. But I'm not going to be up their butt every single day. I'm trying to replicate myself over and over and over again. And I think the more times you can replicate yourself and get out of the way and let other people take over, because we bring a lot of really talented people into this business. And the easiest thing to do is want to talk to that talented person every day. But if you don't ever, get out of their way, they can never grow. And a really interesting example of this is I talked to Trey Honeycutt, and Andrew tells a story about when, Trey was not really growing a ton, maybe like 5 years ago, right? And he hired Grady, and Grady started growing, and Dave started growing, and then Trey started growing. And Andrew always told it like Trey started growing because the other guys were growing and he didn't want to get left behind. So I brought that up to Trey one time. I'm like, do you think that was true? And he was like, no, I started growing partially because of that. But the other reason was because Andrew finally stopped being, like shadowing over me every single day and micromanaging me. And I had to figure some shit out of my own. And I had to learn how to be a business person. I had to go out and do my own thing. So yes, I wanted to grow with these other guys, but when Andrew was there to answer every single question for me all the time, I had no room to grow. And as soon as he started working with them, I had to figure stuff out, and I started growing like crazy because I gained a lot of confidence in myself. I understood I could do it, and I didn't need him for every single answer. I could figure stuff out on my own. And so for me, that was a really valuable lesson in business. That was like, okay, I need to not suffocate my people. Let me get out of their way. Let me be there to help them if they need help, once they're up and rolling. And then let me do my job. And the best thing I can do is bring on more people to do the same thing I taught them how to do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on in there or not, but I can keep going and rambling forever if you want me to. But
I see a question here in the chat from Tanisha. She said she asked, what type of challenging questions do you do during an interview when you're trying to bring on a new agent?
Sure, yeah. So first thing I always tell people is I'm like, look, this is a great business, but it can be incredibly punishing too. So it's a great business because you control your own schedule, you control your income when you get really good at it. But there's a reason everyone doesn't do it. And it's because there's a hard learning curve in the beginning. You have to have some guts to get through the beginning phase where you're trying to learn everything. And there's chargebacks, there's lead expenses, and you have to be a disciplined person. So what happens a lot of times is agents will come on, they'll make some money, they forget that 30% of the business falls off, and they go do well for a couple months, take vacation, come back, spend all their money, have chargebacks, and then have to buy leads, and they fail out of the business. And the other thing that happens is agents will have days, even the best agents in the companies will have days where they make phone calls for 2 days, they sell nothing. They go out in the field for 2 days, they sell nothing. They try to do virtual sales, they try to sell IULs, they try to sell life insurance, they try to sell everything. And they couldn't sell water to a person dying of heat stroke in the desert. It happens to everyone. And what happens a lot of times is when new agents have that happen, they spend say $1,000 on leads and they go 2 days without making any sales, then they'll quit. So if something like that. Oh,
sorry about that. Let's try and mute someone else coming in. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. So I'm like, when that happens to you, how would you react to it? Would you be able to make it through there? Or if you don't make a profit every single lead order that you order, are you gonna want to quit? And a lot of times people are like, that really happened. There'll be times when you buy leads not make any money. Like, absolutely that'll happen. And there's gonna be times where you 10x your lead order. But this is about being consistent and being able to learn a new skill, which takes a bit of time. And then being able to be disciplined enough to be able to refine that skill, get better at it, and then if you want to build a business, to be able to replicate it in other people. But it's a very simple business, but it's very, very punishing if you're not disciplined. So is that something that you would be able to make it through if that happened to you? And so just things like that, right? Or I'll ask them like, hey, what's some adversity you've been through in your life and how did you overcome it? Or if have you ever been in business for yourself before? Or tell me about a time where you failed in life or in business and then what you did to react to it. How do you do with taking critical coaching? Like if you do something dumb and I tell you did something dumb, how are you going to react to it? I'll be respectful, but I'm going to tell you what you're doing wrong because I care about you. And I'm the person that, if someone has, something in their teeth or something on their face, I'll tell them. And I tell my friends that because I care about them. And I tell people in business that when they're doing something wrong, I tell them what they're doing wrong so that they don't put their family in a bad financial situation. And then also, the other thing is, go ahead.
I do have a question about that because I remember you saying, I don't know what training was on, but you were saying that you didn't feel you were liked when you were newer. And I'd imagine that has to do with the delivery of your message when people were doing things not right. And I think we've all been there. Like, I think I used to be a complete dick, which is why we struggled to grow the first 3-4 years. And then you learn how to deal with and talk to people. What do you think what do you think helped you deliver the messages to where you weren't running people off and let them know that you actually do care about them?
Yeah. So like in the interview process, like we were talking about, I'll be really direct like that and upfront and tell them downside, upside, all of it. Right. Now, if it's an agent that's already working with me and they're doing something like say you're excelling, Frank, and you're kind of up and down all over the place and you're, sporadic with your work schedule. I found out the number one rule I think with building a team is nothing good happens over text messages because everyone sounds like an asshole over text messages, right? Like even if you use the right emojis, you still sound like a dick if you say something mean. So what I would do is I'd go, hey Frank, I've seen what you're doing. I know how talented you are. Let me ask something. Are you happy with your results right now? Like, are you good with where you're at? And if Frank goes, yeah, man, everything's good. Like I'm working a couple days a week. I'm going out on my boat a bunch. I'm hanging out with my family a bunch. I'm going to all my kids' games, and I'm just chilling. I'm golfing 4 days a week. I love it, and I can sell a little bit and make a little bit of money. I'm like, sounds good, man. If you need anything from me, I'm here for you. And keep doing your thing. And what I used to do is go like, hey, Frank, you're not working very much. Let's get, and I would force what I thought he should be doing down his throat, which is what drove a lot of people the wrong way, right? Now, because there are people, and I have a lot of agents on my team that are, friends of mine, people I've known from the past that work like a very part-time schedule, enjoy the heck out of their lives. And I'm like, more power to you, dude. And I used to run those people off because I would force my beliefs down their throat. And then I realized how effed up my beliefs are. I'm like, why would anyone want to have, my brain works in a really crazy way. I don't wish it on anybody. So why would I force the way this works on everyone else, right? So I started asking it that way. And then, dude, a lot of the time, like a shocking amount of the time, people are like, no, man, I'm good. Thanks for calling though. And then I'll just catch up with them and shoot the breeze about life. And that's actually good because it's way less work for me. If you don't want to get better, I'm like, we could just talk about like whatever you want to talk about. Sounds good to me. And then sometimes like probably 60% of the time, people are like, dude, I'm totally good. Thanks for calling. And we just catch up. Right. And I think that's important, by the way, when you're building a team, catch up with your people, know where they're at, see how they're doing, take the temperature, just check in with all your people a lot, all your, the people you work with. And the other 40% of the time, if they're like, I'm not happy with where I'm at, I'm like, sounds good. Are you willing to change anything as far as like, your schedule, lead investment, etc.? Or are you just not happy, but you're not willing to change? And most people will go like, no, I'm willing to change some things. And, sometimes people are like, I already know what I need to do, but we can go through it. And then sometimes people are like, I'm just messing this thing up, but I need to fix something. And then I can dive into a deeper conversation with them based on what they want. And if you, same like within the home, right? You don't go in there and go, hey, you need this product for this reason, and this is how great it is. You go, hey, Bob and Mary, what would happen if X, Y, and Z? You ask them, you sell them based on what they need. Same thing with agents, right? It's, hey, based on, where you're at, what are you trying to earn? What are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to build a team? Do you not want to build a team? Do you just want to be able to sell? Are you interested in learning other types of sales? And you just cater what you're doing for that agent around, what they want to do with their lives. So that made people not hate me anymore because I was building it around what they wanted to do. And then when you're talking to an agent later, be like, hey man, a week ago we had this conversation. This is what you wanted to do. Are you still there? Or are you kind of backpedaling from that? Because I don't want to be annoying, but I do want to help you and help you get to where you said you wanted to get to.
Okay.
That's powerful. Zach, when I remember when Easton came aboard, and a lot of people, who saw when Easton was producing a ton, what were you able to do to help him? I mean, because his numbers were nothing. I remember him running like 30, 40 appointments or writing $2,000. And I think that's at the point where a lot of agents come in and most people aren't willing to continue to go like him. How were you able to coach him in the beginning to keep moving past? I remember weeks where he said he basically was just breaking even, but he never stopped. How'd you deal with coaching in that situation?
Yeah, so I did what I think I do best, and I found someone who was better at coaching than I was and linked him up with them, right? So I was like, look, I know you have to run this activity, do well in this business. I'm obviously not doing a good job of coaching you. So I would link him up with like John Wetmore. I remember Easton will credit Mark Mead for a really big breakthrough he had. And I called Mark. I'm like, hey man, I have this guy. I have like 2 guys, and one of them is working really hard, and I'm trying not to make him quit. Can you get on the phone with him and see what I'm doing wrong? And he just like threw me into a call with Easton. I listened to him go, and I was like, can I listen to you talk to him though? And he was like, yeah, sure. And I listened to him go through and like figure out where the issue was and systematically kind of break it down. And that's one thing I've always asked people is I'm like, hey, can you help my agent? But can I listen on how it goes? Right. Or like, I always just want to be in the room so I can listen and see how someone who's better at it than me does it so that I can figure out exactly what's needed. Right. So that one, I just listened to the way Mark broke down the call with Easton and figured out like, oh, okay, you're just rushing like this part of your appointments and you're doing this wrong or whatever exactly that it was. But it was a big teaching moment for me to be able to understand how to like pick apart what's going on with the agent and then figure out how to identify it and fix it. So whenever I've not known how to do something in business, like I think when you're selling, it's okay to pretend to be confident and pretend like you know what you're doing because it's not, you can't really mess it up. When you're building a business, like there's a lot of stuff you can screw up. So I've always just defaulted to asking someone who's already been there and let them do the heavy lifting for me and learn from that mistake or learn from that, lesson that I'm going through. So that's my biggest thing. I always push people to someone who knows what they're doing. And I just try to, and then I talk to Easton after. I'm like, what are the biggest things that you got from the conversation with Mark? Because I was always just trying to learn like, okay, if this comes up again, I want to be able to handle it the second time. I can't always rely on Mark. Yeah. Right. So let me see how he handles this conversation.
Awesome. Okay. Anyone else? Frank, you got anything else?
Dude, I could ask him a million questions. What was your schedule running? And first of all, how long did you hit Hall of Fame numbers? How many years in a row did you hit Hall of Fame?
I hit all 3 years I was in the field, I hit Hall of Fame. So it was 2018, 19, and 2020. Yep.
Okay.
And my schedule, which I think is cool for new agents on here who are just starting to sell, or if you're just starting to get to like getting good at this. So 2018, my schedule was I ran 4 days a week, 8 appointments a day. So 32 appointments a day, minimally a month, right? And then 2019, and that year I wrote 408,000. And then 2019, I wrote like 500,000 on the same schedule. And then 2020, I wrote like 800,000, but I only ran 2 days a week that year. And I think what happens is you get so much better, so much exponentially quicker, but a lot of people don't like do the work hard, like long enough to get really good. But by that end of that last year, like I was pretty good at, and mostly just good because I was confident. I knew which houses to get in and out of pretty quickly. And I started adding in like IUL and annuity sales. But you become so much better if you just do the like really hard, annoying work for a long period of time. And I just think a lot of people either give up too soon or just aren't willing to go through that crappy phase. But by 2020, I felt like every week I knew I was like a lock for 15 to 20 apps a week, no matter what was happening. Because you just get that hockey stick effect on the sales side. And then when you have that, dude, I had so much time for building because I would run Saturday and Sunday every week. And then I'd have Monday through Friday where I could just work on building the business all week long. Because my thing was I'm going to hit 15 between Saturday and Sunday. If I don't run Monday, I was always going to hit 15 between Saturday and Sunday. And there were some weeks where I ran Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to hit those numbers still. But my goal was to knock that out so I could focus the rest of the week on working with my staff, working with new agents, doing recruiting calls. And when I did that, that was like the biggest growth year we had. And we did our integrity deal, LOI February of the following year after that. But I was just so efficient with my time because I got better at selling, putting in the hard work in 2018 and 2019.
Dude, and that's not, and that's the thing is I don't know how many people are willing to work 7 days a week for as long as you did to get to where you're at. And so let me ask you this question. And I don't know if I'm hurting people by asking this question or not, but I'm going to ask it because I believe it's to be true. So I believe in 2020, 2021, and when COVID hit, were the easiest years to sell insurance, period, end of story. Mm-hmm. I also think it was easier to build a business in those years. And I think a lot of people that came in the last 3 years, 4 years saw that and expect to have that same growth now with the changes that I've made. And I'm sure it's still possible. I don't know if it's going to be as prevalent and as many people doing it. Do you have any people asking you those questions, and how do you manage expectations to where you can tell people, look, business is ups and downs, and it's not always going to grow as fast as it does in certain times of I guess, economy and situations?
Yeah. So I think that's a good point. I was talking to someone about that the other day, and I think the only reason the people that blew up in 2020, 2021, like during that time, were the people that were prepared for it, right? And so like those were all the people that did the work the years leading up to that, like 2017, 18, 19. And so there's going to be times where business is easier and business is harder. But my view on it is that you always work the same, no matter how easy or hard the conditions are, because you don't know when it's going to get really good. And you want to stay ready, right? Like, and I had views on like this going back into sports. So like when I was playing lacrosse, my sophomore year, we won a national championship, and I worked really hard all the time. I was deep on the depth chart that year. I was like 5th on the depth chart, my position. And then throughout the playoffs that year, everyone got hurt. Like all 4 people in front of me got hurt, and I started like the last 3 games in the playoffs, right? And I played pretty well, but it wasn't because like everything lined up really well, but if I wasn't ready, then they would have moved on to someone else, right? I think the same thing in business. Like you have to do all the little things, and there's going to be times of harvest, there's going to be times that are really great. But if you're not good at your craft, you're not going to be able to, capitalize on those. And like a good example for the sales side of this is a lot of people, we have a lot of agents. We probably sell like $1.5 million a month of IUL business now. Like we're really cranking out that side. We've built out platforms to accommodate that side of our business. And I have a lot of new agents that are like, hey, can I get in on this? I'm like, not yet, because we need you to build the base. Because even if you have one of these like quote unquote magical leads, which they're not, if you suck at selling, you're not going to be able to sell them. So I'd rather you learn on lower leverage situations where you can, present some final expense business and get the basics of selling down so that when you're presented with a higher leverage opportunity, you can capitalize. Because if you have no sales acumen, even if you have the best lead in the world, you're going to fumble it and you're going to not sell the person. So you have to build the base. And then whenever the really good higher leverage opportunities come, then you'll be able to capitalize. Or like Frank in recruiting, right? Like if you haven't spent time recruiting a bunch of people, that are individual agents and got really good at having conversations and really good at, finding people's, hot button points and like really good at the whole recruiting process. If you find someone who has a really big agency that you come across that's interested in working with you, if you suck at recruiting, that person's not going to work with you. And you can't get good and just get lucky, right? You have to do all the little stuff and stay ready for when the big opportunities come and then capitalize when they do come. But you never know when it's going to be, right? So like that's why you do the little stuff right every single day. And then when something good happens, hammer it, and run with it. And when you're going downhill, go downhill. But it's really hard to time that right. So I think the best way to do it is just to always stay ready and always do the little things so that you can capitalize when the time comes.
Dude, I love that. And I that is such good advice. And I'm thinking when you're saying, I'm thinking back going like, dude, I've been a Family First since day one. Mm-hmm. We hit a growth spurt during COVID because we were ready. I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years. And it took 7 years for me to be ready to take advantage of that, which is crazy. And we get people that have done it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And they're like, I've been doing this forever. No, not really. You know what I mean? It's just, that is such good advice. I freaking love that. I love that analogy. And that's true. You were a sophomore. You were fifth on the death report. Played the last 3 games, including the championship.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's freaking awesome. Dude, I was with Easton last week in Omaha. Dude, I like him. He's such a good dude. He's such a good dude.
Yep, he is. And he's another guy, like just works his butt off nonstop, no matter what's going on, good, bad, or indifferent, always working, always stays ready. Right.
Yeah. And he's just very calm. I mean, we were talking about building and he just you have that very same even keel, you don't seem to be too high. You don't seem to be too low. And I think that rubs off on your team, which is a good, have you always been that way in business? Can you tell some of these folks a little bit about your backdrop with your mom and your dad having a business and you having to drive I think it was your mom to treatments, right?
Yeah. So to answer your question, I haven't always been that way. It's taken a lot of personal development to not be emotional. So I'm big on reading books. I'm really big on, doing things to get your mind in the right space every day. So like for me, every single day, non-negotiable, I'm working out, doing something outside every day, no matter what. And I'm always going to listen or read something, personal development. And I'm not a massive reader all the time. Like I read if I'm traveling, but when I'm working out, I'm always listening to an Audible or something, to learn something new. Right. And so it's taken a lot of, I'm naturally like a really negative person, honestly, but it's taken a lot of me, doing personal development and self-development things to get my mind to where it is, which I feel like is an ongoing process, right, for everybody. So I think sometimes people discount or like, go, oh, like, personal development's not important. I think it's very important. I wouldn't be where I am in business without it. And there's so many good, books out there. So I think the answer to that first question, I've not always been that way and I'm not always that way, but I'm always working on it, and then backdrop story. So yeah, like my parents are all in the medical field. We just moved to Austin. My wife's a doctor. My dad's a doctor. My sister is a doctor. My wife's twin's a doctor, like all doctors. And I was going to go to medical school. And the short version is we took a couple years off and I started selling insurance and I was like, oh, well, I'm making as much money as I would as a doctor already. Like, I'm not going to go back to school. That seems dumb. But the reason as I started doing this business, reflecting back, my mom had cancer when I was 15 years old. And the reason I thought I wanted to build a business was I had to drive her from Grand Junction, Colorado, small town, on the western part of the state on the border of Utah and Colorado, to Denver a couple times a month, like from the time I was 15 through 16 and a half years old. And my dad was a doctor. He owned his own practice though. So like if he didn't see patients, we didn't make any money, right, as a family. So I had to be the one to drive her back and forth and miss all kinds of stuff. And my dad's like stoic as could be. Like I think he said I love you like once in my life, and that's fine. Like I know he loves me, but we just have a very he's like an old school Polish, like man's man, right? Like grew up very Orthodox Polish. And anyway, like that was like the second time I'd ever seen him cry in his life, was when he asked me to have to do that and miss all the things I was missing as a kid, right? So when I saw the opportunity to build a business and passive income here and be able to help people, but never have to decide between, do I want to spend time with my family, or like, or do I need to be there for my family, or sorry, I'm sorry, that's a fat AD.
No worries.
Do I be there for my family, or go take care of business? Like, if you build a business the right way here, you don't have to think about that, And so it was big for me. Like, we just had our first kid 8 months ago today, actually. And so I was able to be at all the doctor's appointments, get to see her every day. Like, that's really important to me. And it made all the dealing with all the crap worth it,
Yeah, no doubt. All right. So Mike, I have two more questions I can ask if you don't.
No, go ahead. It's all you, man.
If I'm a brand new agent starting right now, Zach, how are you getting me started on the track that you've started so many people on?
Yeah, so it's just level setting and setting the right expectations for people. Most of our agents are doing virtual sales now. So now it's just for us, our goal is to get everyone in front of 7 to 8 presentations per day on the phone, and keep going until you have that many presentations. And our goal is to try to get, for a new agent, I'm like, can we try to get a sale every day or a sale every other day, right? And so, like, when I was a new agent in the field, my goal was just to, I would dial one day and I'd book the next day, because I was so bad on the phone. So I'd dial Monday, I'd run Tuesday, and then I'd dial Wednesday, I'd run Thursday. And so my goal was just like, can I make one sale per every day I'm in the field? Mm-hmm. And so what I like to do with new agents is like, can we just set an attainable goal where you can hit it and hit it consistently and then build on it, right? So, like, can we get a sale every day? If we can't get a sale every day, can we get a sale every other day if we're doing virtual sales? And then once we are at least getting one every other day, can we get a sale a day? Then can we get 2 sales a day, and start building from there, right? But I think, Frank, a big issue is a lot of people go like, oh, I see all these people. Like, I know you mentioned someone who submitted like 37 this week, which is awesome, right? Like, but as a new agent, that sounds like a lot. And you're like, how does that do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And the best advice I have is just run your own race, right? And just get a little bit better than you were yesterday, and set benchmarks to be able to, to hit. Like, here's a dumb example of this. Like, I ran a triathlon in May as a bet to some friends, because they said I wouldn't do it, and I lost the bet. And anyways, I had to do it. And I don't like endurance training, but I started doing it. I started training for it, and I went to run a mile the first time, and it sucked really bad. My heart rate, I was like, my Apple Watch is like 190. I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to be that high. I think I'm having a heart attack. And then, but like, so I had to, and I kept doing a mile for a while until I could do it and not almost die, right? And then I was like, okay, let me get to 2 miles. Let me get to 3 miles. Okay, like, maybe I need to try swimming now, because I haven't done that since I was like 15 years old. So, like, let me start swimming. And so you just have to do what you can do, and then get a little bit better every single day, right? And this business is the same way. Like, if you're running in the field and you can't book 15 appointments the next 2 days, just dial on Monday for Tuesday and book 8 that day.
Yeah.
Right. And then just try to sell one of those, and then just build on your skill set as you get better. I don't have to answer your question. I started rambling, but I just trying to get agents to start wherever they are, and then just start adding a little bit to what they're doing every single day, instead of going from, not being able to run a marathon. Like, let's just get to a mile, and then 2, 3, 4, right? As opposed to jumping to 37 apps a week. Like, that's great, but if you're a new agent with no experience, that's probably not going to be you right away, and that's okay. Let's build up to that.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I think that's perfect, because I think it's hard for to think back when we were new, because you've been doing it for so long, and you're like, no, just write 10 grand a week. It's not that complicated. Well, no, it's not that complicated for us, but when you're brand new, it's hella complicated. So, Mike, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I got a question. Zach, what do you do for right now? Do you have more people that are coming in, you think, doing telesales, or do you still have a lot coming in the field? What are you guys doing primarily?
We're doing mostly telesales now at this point, and I was against it for a little bit. But I look at it from a business standpoint. I like the scalability of it. I like the community atmosphere people can be in every day. And I like that we can have people coaching people in Zoom rooms all day long. So we have mostly telesales going on. But again, like anything, right? Like, if I have someone who's trying telesales, it's not working, and they get leads in their area, I'm like, why don't you go run some in the field for a little bit and see if that works, right? And just changing it up if it's not working. Because I don't think anything is the answer. And if you're doing in field sales, if you're doing well, keep doing it, right? We're doing telesales, doing well, keep doing that. But so I don't think there's any one size fits all answer, but if one's not working, I pivot to the other. But we're generally starting people doing telesales now.
Got it. Do you guys have one big, massive Zoom room, or you have a bunch of different ones for the different teams in the agency?
We have probably like 30 different, like, small. We have a ton of small ones that are like, and it's usually a couple people with like 3 or 4 people in each one, which I
Okay.
think is useful because then there can be, a lot of interaction and coaching. And so usually, if someone's a good salesperson, they have a couple agents on their team, like, why don't you just set your own up,
Yeah,
and coach your couple guys or girls.
that makes sense. Okay.
All right, last question. This one came from Colleen. She said, Zach, do you have one of your favorite books that helped you develop that even keeled temperament?
Yeah, I have to look at my Audible thing so one I just read recently, which I think was awesome, was called The Courage to Be Disliked. I thought it was a really good book that it's like a story, but it's really good, kind of breaks you down on how to, how to like think through like high pressure situations. And I think that one was really useful for me. And then I've read a ton of different books just on, on like marketing and people that have been successful in business and whatnot. But the other one I really like if you're looking to build a business is Start With Why, which Frank was at that, which is Brian recommended at the Integrity Partner meeting.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very, very interesting book too. And it teaches you a lot of, useful lessons about leadership. But yeah, The Courage to Be Disliked was useful for me because it, allows you to, it teaches you kind of how to keep your emotions in check when, things are going good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah, no doubt. Dude, Zach,
Zach,
I appreciate you, buddy.
Zach, I got one last question. I like what you said about people that come in and they just want to do IULs right out the gate. People see those numbers. What is kind of your, what do you guys have set up to allow people to kind of get into that part of the business? Do they have to, is it a certain number every month, or what are you looking for to be able to let people get to advanced sales like that?
Yeah, so I think it's again, it's like this in this business. There's very rarely anything that's like a one size fits all type of answer, but a lot of times it's like I'm looking for people that are selling 10 to 15, 20 apps a month, issuing that much business, and then it's a conversation about them like, how's your cash flow? Are you doing pretty well? And then can we slowly add this into what you're already doing? Because as if you start selling all that business, it's great, but you may not see it come through for a month, right? And you may not get paid for a month. So I want to make sure that if I'm going to introduce that to some agents, like while the numbers seem really cool, and while it is really cool once it's rolling for a little bit, like the first little bit, you're going to have a gap where you're not making the money from it. So you need to have other income coming in. And my goal is to have well-rounded, profitable agents, right? So I don't want anyone doing just one thing, but I think the best way to learn is on, final expense and life leads, and then transition to doing other type of sales and adding those to your arsenal.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, man. I think we got 3 minutes. Anyone else have any questions for Zach before we hang up? David had the same IUL question. Beautiful.
Do you get a lot of guys reaching out to you about coming to work here to sell IULs? Because I know I certainly am.
Yeah, we are for sure. And I think it's a cool, it's a good marketing tool. I think, especially if you get leads figured out, which I think you all have some leads figured out with that as well. And the nice thing you can market to other companies with is most companies do not have any sorts of IUL leads besides like, your aunt, your uncle, and like networking and whatnot. So one thing that we've really used as a recruiting tool is like, if you guys have a sustainable lead platform, and I always let them know, like, I understand that, your company's probably told you how evil leads are, but like leads for people that are looking to buy this type of stuff, do you have any sort of way of contacting people that want to, buy IULs, whether, it's a free marketing tool, whether you're getting leads for it, whatever it is, like, do you guys have anything like that in your company? And most do not. So that's been a big way for us to kind of get in the door and start talking to people like, well, hey, why don't you add this one carrier and we'll get you some leads for it and see how that works, right? And that's always, been a good entry in talking to agents for me. Like, hey, why don't you add this one carrier, one product, try this out a little bit and see if you like it. And then if it goes well, maybe we can move some other business with us. Maybe we can work together more, but no pressure. Like, let's just work it a little bit, see if we even like it, And then eventually, like, that's how a lot of larger agencies I brought over, like, they've added one small thing and then they're like, okay, this is going pretty good. Like, let me move some other business over with you now.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I think too, some of those people you're recruiting, you're not trying to take all their business. You just give them a carrier or two and you have leads for them, things like that when they come over. It makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Provide value. And then I think, so one person told me that, I was like, why'd you end up moving all your stuff over? They're like, well, the amount of value you're providing for the one contract we had with you, we figured there was a lot more stuff that you weren't telling us that would be available if you moved it all over. And I'm like, I'm not that deep. So like, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't have much more for you, but I'm glad you moved all your stuff here. So.
Right.
That's awesome.
Mike, I
Great.
think we wrap it up, buddy.
Yeah, man. Zach, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for being on tonight with just a ton of information. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank
Appreciate you, Zach.
All right, everyone. See you guys next week. Everyone, let's crush it this week. Talk to you.